Hey guys, welcome back. In our last video, we talked a little bit about style sheets, about inline styles, header styles, and external style sheets. This time, let's go ahead and start adding a little bit of styles to our CSS so that we can make our page look a little bit better than what it's looking like right now. So our page is very basic at this moment. You'll see that we have some paragraphs here and we have some headings, some on order list. We're going to create another on order list just that it makes it a little bit easier for us to see. And then we'll also have our navigation here and links. So let's go ahead and do the following. Let's go into our style.css. We're going to get rid of the paragraph that we had created before here. So then when we go to the browser, we'll see that everything's back to normal. The first thing that you may not necessarily notice is that there is a little bit of spacing right here on the browser. If you did not know, or you probably did not know, is that most browsers have some styles already applied to the site or to the page. So if the page has no styles, then it actually helps so that it can make it look a little bit better. In other words, you'll see that, for example, our heading 1, heading 2, they have some style applied to them, making them bolder, making them bigger than the rest of the content. You'll see that the heading 4 is about the same size as the main content area. And you'll see that, again, you have this little bit of spacing right here just to make it a little bit easier to see. Let's go ahead and start kind of zeroing out some of these styles so that we know and are able to make some changes and customize it to what we want it to look like. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some styles for our HTML and our body tags. Now, hopefully you remember, but if you go to the style.css, how would you add styles to the HTML tag? Hopefully you know that you can just go into the style.css and type in HTML, open curly brackets, close curly brackets, and that's how anything inside of here is where we're going to add some styles for the HTML tag. Inside of the body tag, we're going to do the same thing. So when you go to the HTML tag, one of the things that I would like for us to get used to is also maybe adding notes to something that you may not understand. So in CSS, in order to add some notes, you would add what is called comments. In the way to add comments to your CSS file is by typing / the asterisk or star, and then you'll see that in our IED, it changes to this green color. And guess what? Just like HTML, we have to close it. So in order to close it, we do it in the reverse order, just like their CSS, the HTML. So we do star / anything inside of here will be a comment. If you want to add style sheets comments, this is the only way that you can add them properly and semantically. So what we're going to do in our HTML is that we're going to say that our base font size for all of our fonts, not just the paragraphs, is going to be something like 18 pixels. If we save this, I would like for you to pay attention to all of our font sizes here, not just the paragraphs. So we're going to refresh this. And you'll notice that everything just made it a little bit bigger. You'll notice here, let's go ahead and make it even a little bit more so that we can notice the change. Refresh all of our paragraphs, the list items, the headings change, and all of the other paragraphs that we have below, as well as our line height. The line height is the space between one line to the next line. If you are talking about typography and graphic design, that will be kind of like your leading. So the space between one line to the next. You also, our paragraphs, for example, have what it's called a paragraph space, which is actually using something called padding. So if we, for example, wanted to inspect our site, our page here, we can right click on this paragraph and then click on where it says Inspect Element. I'm using Firefox, by the way. If you have Chrome and using Chrome, you should be able to do the same. If you're using Internet Explorer, I believe that is also available. But I would suggest, as you're starting, to stick with either Firefox or Chrome. So we're going to do Inspect Element. And in Inspect Element, you can hover over this tile, and then you'll see, for example, that blue area just tells us where the content is. And then that yellow area, it tells us kind of there's some spacing that was added in there by the browser itself. If we were to scroll up, you'll notice here we have our body tag. You'll notice that we have that blue area again, and that blue area has all the content. But remember that little spacing that I told you that makes things look a little bit nicer or make them a little bit more readable is that yellow area all around our body content. So we need to make sure that we zero that out so that we can actually add some styles and add some grid systems in the future on this page. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let me go ahead and close this. And if at any point you want to see some styles and see how things look, you'll be able to see them using this inspector. And we're going to be using that a lot more as we progress in this class. So we go back to our CSS. And here we're going to say something like zero out the margin and padding. And here we're going to zero out the margin and the padding for our body tag. So let's go ahead and I'm going to actually delete this padding for a minute. And we're going to focus on margin. So here's something interesting for some elements that we have on CSS, some properties and some values that we can assign to them. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a margin of something like, say, 50 pixels. Okay, we save this and then we refresh, and you'll notice if we right click, inspect element, I clicked on the URL, that's what happened. So if we click on the element here, you'll see that it says body, and on the right hand side you have 50 pixels, right? You'll notice that here our spacing, you see the yellow area all around our browser from top, left and right, and if we were to scroll down a little bit more to the bottom, you'll see that to the bottom it's all equal. Well, what if we want our top and bottom to be separate than their left and right margins? So let's go ahead and go into their body tag, into our margin property, and add something called, something like, for example, 25 pixels here. If we save this, again, notice that I only have a space between these two declarations. I don't have a colon or commas or anything like that. So it says margin, colon, space. 50 pixels, space, 25 pixels. If we go to the browser and we refresh this, you see that our left and right switched. Look, when we hover over our body in our inspector, you'll see that on the bottom is twice as wide as what is the left and right. And if we were to scroll to the top, our top again is also twice as wide as the left and right, because as you can see on our style sheets here, it says body margin 50 pixels and 25 pixels. What this means is that the 50 pixels is applied to the top and bottom, and the 25 pixels is applied to just the left and right. So if we wanted to make a comment just for your own knowledge and learning, we can make a multi-line comment here and say, for example, margin values. And we can say something like one value is equals to, say, the value applied to all sides. If it has two values, then the first value is applied to top and bottom, and second value is applied to the left and right. Again, I don't like that this moves to the next line, so we're going to go to View, Toggle, Word Wrap, and then that puts it to the next one. So what if we wanted something different? What if we wanted the top value to be one value, the left and right to be a separate value, and then the bottom to have a different value? Guess what? We're going to add another value here. And this one, for example, we're going to say something like 10 pixels. If we add this third value, let's look at what happens in the browser. So let's go back to all the way to the bottom, refresh, and you'll notice that our bottom value or margin is very, very small compared to our left and right. And our top is much bigger than our left and right, and of course, much bigger than our body, than our bottom body tag margin. So when we have a third value, when we have three values, the first value is applied to the top, the second value is applied to the left and right, and the third value is applied to the bottom. So now we have three values, and now we know that if it only has one value here, like 50 pixels, it applies it all around the box. Two values is applied to the top and bottom, the first value, and the second value is applying the spacing or size to the left and right. If it has three values, then it applies that to the bottom one. The first value is applied to the top, the second value is applying to the left and right, and the third value is applying to the bottom margin in this case. Well, guess what? How many sides does a square box have? 4. So what happens if we add a fourth value? Say we add one more value. I want you to think what would happen. If we go to our browser and refresh, then you'll see here that we have our top value, which is our top margin, is very much wider than our right one. The right one is very much wider than the bottom one, and the bottom one is much wider than the left one. It's still there, but it's very, very, very tiny because we added a value of 1 pixel. So as you can see, when we have 4 values, then the first value is applied to the top. The second value is applied to the right. The third value is applied to the bottom. And the fourth value is applied to the left. So in other words, we're actually applying values clockwise, starting from the top. So again, here this will be top, right, bottom, left. So here in this case, this is something very, very important to note and to know, because there are several things where you may have these 4 different values, and that way you know, okay, this is what's happening. If you see margin, like for example here, and you see 4 values, you should know right away that these 4 values are applied to all 4 sides, starting top, right, left, and bottom. If it only has 3 values, then that means that the first value is applying this value to the top, the second one to the left and the right, and the bottom one is applying it to the third one is applying it to the bottom. If it has 2 values, then the first value is applying this size to the top and bottom, and the second one to the left and right. And if you have a single value, then that value is being applied to all 4 sides. In our case, we want to do what? We want to zero out our margin and padding. So here what we're going to do is we're going to make our margin 0, and then we're going to do make our padding 0 as well. And when we refresh, and we scroll to the top and we hover over our body, you'll see that it has 0, 0, 0 everywhere. If you look at over here, you see that white space on the very top. That's because there are some styles that are being applied here to this paragraph, and that's why that gap is happening on top. But we'll fix that as we go along. We just wanted to make sure that our body tag was 0 out. All right, so now we have set up our margin, padding, also our global font size. One of the things that I always recommend is having your base font size on your HTML tag and then adding what is called a variable unit value to the body tag for our font size. So let me explain. Take a look in here. What we're going to do inside of our body tag, I'm going to get rid of this comment, or I'll keep it there. Let's see if I can minimize it. Perfect. So what I did is I went to the number area. You see this down arrow. I can just click on it, and that kind of minimizes it so that I don't have to see it as we continue on these styles that we're adding. So inside of our body tag, we're going to add another font size attribute property here. So we're going to say font size, and here what we're going to do is we're going to use a variable unit. Here's going to be 1 EM. What this EM stands for is for a variable unit. So what this is doing, it's looking at the value of its parent element. So if we look in here, right, we were to do the same thing here, you'll see that we have our body tag and our head tag, and its parent element is going to be the HTML tag. Okay, there's most of programming, you have a children and parent relationship. In most of HTML, CSS, you're going to see a relationship between the children and parent elements. There may be some grandparent elements, but we'll get to that later on. Again, children, parent. In this case, we're adding styles to our body tag. So the parent tag for the body tag is going to be the HTML tag. So what this is doing, again, let me add another comment here. This is using this EM or variable unit to go and take the value from the font size of our HTML. So what this is doing is this value right here, or this scalable measurement, what it's going to do is we're going to multiply 1 times whatever value is that value up there, so 25 pixels. So you may be questioning why. Wait a minute, I'll show you why this is important. So take a look at this. So if we go ahead and go in here, we refresh our site or our page, nothing happened because we're still using 1 times the same value as the one above. What if we were to do 2? What this is going to do again is going to multiply the 2 times that font size above. So now our font size is going to be equals to 50 pixels. So if we refresh, wait for it, then all of our font sizes are now changing based on response to this value up here. You see that? What if I wanted to do maybe 1.25? Again, you will use that 25 and you'll multiply it times 1.25, and then you'll get that value here. Okay, that's how you do responsive font sizes. Later on, we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but this is just as an introduction to variable units. Okay, meaning these units will change based on whatever value is up here. So for example, what if our HTML font size were to change in the future and we're to say something like 16 pixels? Then what this is going to do is going to multiply 1.25 times 16 pixels. And instead of us having to pull up our calculator and have to do the math and then add values to each one of these independent units or properties and attributes, then it would do it for us automatically. So you see that again. Let's go ahead and we're going to keep it to 16, and here we're going to say 1 EM, for example. Again, just so that you know, this is going to be a multiplication here. The next thing that we're going to do is we would like to maybe figure out all the different font sizes that we want to use on our site. So instead of us having to kind of think of, or maybe that heading looks a little bit too small, or maybe the other heading looks a little bit too big, and kind of go through trial and error, there's a great website that I use that helps me figure out what would be a good relationship from all the font sizes. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open a new tab. So we're going to go to modularscale.com. Okay. And in here, on the left-hand side, you're able to select different ratios. For example, if you wanted to use the golden ratio, which is a 1.618, then you can click on that. And here you'll notice that it's giving us all these different responsive sizes for all of our different kind of tags and elements that we can add on the site. So let's go ahead and 1.618 is a good ratio, but I feel that sometimes it can be really big depending on what you're trying to do. Or, I mean, you can use that one. Another one that is really good is the major third that I use. That one, if you notice, it has a little bit more of an increment as far as the font sizes go. However, we can use the golden section here. You'll see that our basic font size is going to be the 1 EM. So let's go ahead and take a look at our page. You'll see that our font size here is our paragraph. You'll notice that, for example, our heading 4 is about the same size as this one. Our heading 3 a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger, and then our heading 5 and heading 6 are a little bit smaller. So let's go ahead and add some font sizes that will make it a little bit nicer to look at. So let's go into our CSS, and right here we're going to add styles to our heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, and heading 6. Let's go into modular scale. And what we're going to say is, if this is my heading 4 size, which is about the same size as our paragraph, this will be my heading 3, my heading 2, and my heading 1. So my font size for my heading 1 is going to be 4.236 EM. So here we're going to go in heading 1 and add a font size of 4.236 EM. We're going to go into the heading 2, which will be 2.618 EM. And we're going to go in and say font size 2.618 for our heading 3, and so on and so forth. We're just going to go from the site into our website, into our CSS, and we're going to add these font sizes so that we can see how they look when they're scaled out. Again, I personally don't use our heading 5s and heading 6. There might be people out there that use them, and that's why it's a good idea to look at them. There's really not a lot of benefit of having an H5 and H6 when it comes down to search engine optimization. So we just added all of these different font sizes. If we go to our now page and we refresh, you'll see that here we have our main content area, and then you have our heading 3, heading 2, heading 1. All of the different sizes that have been changed. Now, because we are using responsive font sizes using this EM here, guess what? When we change our HTML or our top parent style for our font size, say we change it to 20 pixels, guess what? all of these other font sizes are going to react and change using the same scale that we're using here. So for example, here on our H1, then what this is doing is multiplying 4 times 236 times the HTML font size. Right? So this is what this section is doing. That's one of the biggest benefits of using a responsive unit of measurement like EM. All right, so we go back here. Now, notice that modular scale, we're using this ratio of 1.618. You notice that? So what if we wanted to make the font size, the line height, to be like 1.618? Line height 1.618, so that it keeps everything in line here. So let's go ahead and if we refresh our page, you'll notice that there was a little bit of a difference. Now, it's hard to see because we just have, for example, heading 1 in here. But let's go ahead and do something different. Let's go ahead and go to the Google. Little red fox jumped over the little red fox jumped over the lazy dog. This one is a good way to kind of see all your letters working with each other because every single letter on the alphabet is in this sentence. So let's go back to our template, our body tag, and let's go in and change our heading 1, or do heading 1 dash the little red fox jumped over the lazy dog. And like a little lazy dog, I'm going to copy this and paste it in all the other ones as well. And then maybe I want a little bit more than just that paragraph that I have in there. So I'm going to go to lipsum.com, which is, it creates lorem ipsum, or this made up language here, so that we can get a little bit more content on the page. So this content area here, we're going to paste this paragraph, and again, I don't like it when it goes over, so I'm going to click on that toggle, and I am going to refresh now, and now you'll see the difference between this heading right here, occupying this space, right? This line right here. What would happen if we change that line height? So for example, let's go ahead and take a look at this bottom paragraph. You'll notice that they're kind of close to each other. That means that we need to give it a global line height for all of our typography that is going to be applied to the site. So we're going to do it on the body tag, and we're going to add line height. Again, line height is a separation from one sentence to the next sentence inside of the same paragraph. It's different than paragraph spacing, which is this paragraph separated to this paragraph down here. We're really not going to make any changes to that just yet. So here we're going to do line height of 1.618 EM. Now, here's something interesting. You see that we have our font size here is 1 EM, and this is multiplying this 1.618. I'm sorry, 1 EM, right? 1 multiplying times the HTML font size, right? Well, what do you think is doing down here? This line height when we use EM. When we use EM, this is going to multiply to the font size as well. So here it's going to be 1.618 times the font size. But who is the parent of this line height? If you guess that it was HTML, the HTML tag, you're actually wrong. This line height, its parent is the body tag, which again gets the value from this font size here. So what this is multiplying the font size here of 1.618 multiplied times the font size of the current element. Okay, so when we refresh here, pay attention to the paragraph down below. You'll see that now there's a little bit more separation between one line and the next, and it makes it a little bit easier to kind of see and understand as you're looking at the page. We're going to do the same thing, this line height of 1.618 to all of our other headings as well. Right here, and right here. Now, we're taking a look at this. And now all of these change their line height. But remember we talked about CSS, and that CSS stands for what? Cascading Style Sheets, meaning that the styles that get applied to the top should cascade down to where? The bottom. And the same thing, any styles that are applied to the bottom would override whatever styles are applied on the top. So, do you notice that we actually have our heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, and heading 5, and they all have the same line height? Wouldn't it be nice if we were to have one declaration where we could make that change and it would apply to all of them at once? Well, guess what? We can combine the elements that we're applying values to so that we can actually make that change. So let's take a look in here. Let me show you. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine all of our heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 into one declaration. We're going to do H1. And guess what? We're going to add a comma. This comma creates the separation from one element to the next. So H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. Again, they are all separated by this comma, and I add space just because it's easier to read. It's not necessary, but anything that makes it easier for me to read, I'm going to add it. So again, in order to add styles to those elements, I'm going to add the curly bracket, hit enter, and guess what? Now I can get rid of all these line heights and place them in here as well. H5 and H6. And if we go to the side, again, nothing has changed because these styles that we're applying to the top are cascading all the way down here to the H6, from H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. Now, what other things that can we apply to the site? You know that something very interesting happens when you create websites. When you look at a screen, because it's so bright, this contrast between the white background and a dark heading or color like this black here, it's a little bit harder to see. It creates a little bit more of it makes your eyes tired from reading it, right? So we want to keep our users comfortable. Again, think about usability and usability and user design. So when you think about this, we want to make it easier for them to see the page. What we're going to do is we're going to change the color of all of our fonts. And here we're going to change it on the body tag, and we're going to change the color of our fonts, and we're going to say color. Now, color, you're able to define different colors here. There's different ways to do it. You can use something called RGB, which is the red, green, blue. You can also use something that is called hexadecimals that starts with a pound sign. And you also have something like, for example, just saying blue. just calling the color like it is, or you could also do something like, for example, HSL, I believe, yes, which stands for hue, saturation, and value. So what this does again is uses the color spectrum. We're going to talk about that later on and kind of how to choose colors for your website. But in this case, we're just going to stick with hexadecimal just because it's a little bit easier. And again, I'll have a link below so you can see some different colors that you can use on the site. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to do the color of 666. 666. Hexadecimal, we have 6 different values here. 666, and as you can see here on Visual Studio, this is a dark gray. When we refresh our site, then now you see that this is a light gray that we're going to use here. What if we want the headings to stand out a little bit more? Well, we can go to the H1 to H6 declaration and we can add a color just for that. Say something like 222222. When we save that, we refresh that. Now our headings stand out and our paragraphs look a little bit better. So after this, again, in this section, we talked a little bit about zeroing out some styles for your page, adding some CSS. We talked a little bit about margin. We need to talk a little bit more about padding, and that'll be in the next unit. And we talked a little bit about styles for our line heights, font size, colors. In the next unit, we're going to talk a little bit more about typography, and we're going to add different font families, and we're going to add a little more styles to make our site look better. See you in the next unit.